Now, I would like to welcome you all for the gathering Gevik to the Claire show. I met her in 1990, when I opened up to this gathering in 1990. She was here. She said, I'm an artist, I have this, and showed me, invited her home. I went there. There was things unbelievable. So I got the studio, all over the place, this sculpture. I really liked them. I took them to 3-4 drawings and then sculptures. That time, whatever the Canadian public wasn't ready for the her work. You know, just the work was so avant-garde for them. And Sarah Milroy one day texted me, Sunday, there was a special artist, I would like to have a show. And when does it come? Oh, I know that already, I forgot. And then we just really started, and then we went to the Callaghan home, and then also everything comes up, all started. And Sarah is from the chief creator, McMichael. She threw all around McMichael where it was before, right now, totally different. She's a patient of the art. She's the hardest worker, creator I ever seen. 10%.
Oh, it's all a pleasure. And so it's wonderful to have the exhibition at the Callaghan Club to really, for all of us to sink our teeth into, and of course this wonderful show at Gevik. And I just have to say, at the risk of embarrassing our host, that Phil is one of my favorite people in the Canadian art world. He is so for his artists, and I really do want to have a round of applause for Phil because he's really about the ideas, he's really about the passion. He is devoted to the real stuff in the art world. He's not a person who blows this way and that with the winds of fashion. And he has a deep, powerful commitment to Canadian art, and he's had a huge impact in the art of this city and indeed in Canada overall. But where I got, really curious about Claire since I had that wonderful day, I guess it was March 2021 when I came. Barry had me for a wonderful lunch with Susan Swan, and then after lunch I got to go upstairs and basically look at every sheet of paper in the studio. I think I was up there for about 4 hours, and it was just a marvelous revelation.
What is that woman doing? I said to myself.
What is that woman doing up there? She's having an epiphany. And the epiphany was really around these works that I had known about tangentially earlier on in my career, as I said, and that was the Hill Mother series. I came then to appreciate the Eddie series and the Lovemaking series and all the other wonderful works that she made. But it was the Hill Mother series that really struck me, and we have a number of exquisite examples of it here today, these two and another one down there. And one here, a couple of places in this beautiful show. But that sense of motherhood, this kind of almost nightmarish sense of the mother swarmed with babies. Like some of them, it seems like it's a good thing. Other works in the series, it seems like they're just taking over, and she's just like this kind of, like a pig with a million piglets, kind of like drawing her life force out of her. They're beautiful. The women are always seem to be, in a kind of a fraught state, and even if they're curled up with their multiple young, it's you notice the kind of expressiveness of the hands and the bigness of the feet and the hands. Kind of, I'm just going to get some water. Kind of ground the figures in an idea of female strength. They're very. They're very extreme images of motherhood, and of course, in this period in international art, there were women like Mary Kelly in the U.S. making work about the rigors of motherhood, which was really not something that was much acknowledged in art at that time. Or indeed, a few years later, Mary Pratt, giving us a sense of her domestic life as being both full of everyday epiphanies, but also, confining, sometimes maddeningly so. So I really think that Claire's drawings are of a piece of a moment in feminist art history that make them incredibly important documents. And she went on from the Hill Mother series, which is of course all about seething life, into the Eddie drawings, which are really all about seething death. They're about the death camps and about the way that women managed to find comfort in each other, how people came together to care for each other and for their children in this most impossibly difficult situation that they found themselves in. And if anyone hasn't read the diaries of Eddie Hillesham, I highly recommend them. She was an absolutely extraordinarily brave woman. And I think, I'm quite sure that Claire, identified with her, because Claire had to go through a lot of courage herself. And just to loop back to the family life, I told you about her parents, but her father was also deeply damaged by his war experiences. And at one point, the household became very violent. He threatened her mother with an axe. The family blew apart. He was clearly a very traumatized individual. So she not only had to go through that personal dance with death herself as a young woman, but she also, experienced that in her home life. After her release from the sanitarium, she very quickly married Wiseman, became her husband. She had 4 children in quick succession. But again, she found herself confronting a kind of violence when her husband sort of insisted that she choose between making art and being a mother. I guess he was critical of her, felt that she, wanted to demand of her a more sort of bovine conformity to what motherhood might be. And of course, that was not something that someone like Claire could tolerate. So she left the home. She maintained her relationship with her kids outside of the home and away from the father, but her own mother went into the home with the husband and took care of the children there, but was estranged from her own daughter in that decision her daughter made to leave the marriage. So that's a lot of pain, and somehow she manages to come through that and create this extraordinary body of work. I also wanted to just kind of clarify something, because the received idea is that Claire's work, because it was about sex, was too racy for Toronto. But in fact, it was 2 things. It was the fact that it was about sex and by the works that were about sex, that it was about sex and it was by a woman. That was one thing, because sex was all the male artists were making art about. I mean, there's Rayner, Coughtry, Mike Snow, the whole Dennis Burton, everyone was making pictures about sex, but they were very buoyant, highly colorful, jolly, Rogering kind of pictures about, pop era, swinging 60s pictures about sex. They weren't about a kind of, maybe perhaps more from a female perspective, about a kind of harrowing intimacy that Claire brings to the page when she addresses these subjects. And they also, it's a woman's perspective, but it's also, I believe, a Jewish perspective on life and death, that they are bound up with each other. And so her portraits of people having sex with each other are really full of the sense of the mortality of the body, as are her paintings of mothers and their babies. There's a sense of the woman's body is the matrix that they draw life from, and the next revolution of the wheel will be the children will become the mothers. And you feel that wheel of time in Claire's work. And so I think that also was a kind of perspective that in the kind of waspy Toronto art world was maybe not, they weren't ready for that. So I don't know if it was the sex that was the issue, or if it was the kind of element of the grotesque at times in her work. I think it was who was doing the speaking. And Toronto wasn't ready for that. And the question is Toronto ready for that now? Because they're still incredibly difficult pictures to look at, some of these. But they are among, this work here is got to be one of the great works of art reflecting the Jewish experience in the history of Canadian art. This is a masterpiece drawing.
I mean, what's really remarkable about the drawings, he didn't speak of the line, he just spoke of it. He said, the hands. You can go around the world and look at the work of painters all over the world. They can't draw hands to save their lives. The hands are just blobs. They're just there. They don't work. He said, not only does she have this feel for the hand, and once Claire said to me, when I asked her about it, she said, I can see the bones in a hand underneath the skin. The other thing that Milroy said was, if you look at the hands, There's always a relationship between the feeling in the hands and the feeling in the eyes. And this is my explanation as to why so many great writers all over the world were attracted to her work and introduced her work all over the world. Relationships. That's what writers care about. Relationships. Even if it's a monologue, it's the relationship with oneself. The mystery in all of these drawings, and in her sexual drawings, it's what upsets a lot of people. For every moment of pleasure, there's pain. For every moment of pain, there is pleasure. It's a complex thing. It seemed to be just natural to her to see the body that way. So when she was drawing a couple making love, you know, to her it was just a natural tension between people and the tension that she felt in sex. She loved sex, but it didn't mean that sex was always pleasurable without pain. Claire, well, she thought it was a mistake at the time, read some love poems that she shouldn't have read. It so upset her that she went into her head, and for a period of about 6 months, she did about 6 drawings a day, imagining sexual relationships. Obviously imagining the relationships in the letters or in the poems. And she said that to her, this was a moment of great freedom. She, as she put it, she never went back to the model again. Everything from that point on was her imagination only. That was a great liberating moment, and she saw it that way. She never spoke ill of the relationship that caused it, or, as a matter of fact, the woman who was part of it, whom she grew to know through the years, to her, what was at stake was liberation, freedom to come out of her imagination and see what she saw in there in the same way that she saw in front of us. That's enough.
Thank you.